So you'll see the recording is on now, just so that everyone knows that it's on. So everyone has to be nice. Nobody can swear and don't eat.
What about drinking vodka? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
That's okay.
Coffee.
That's okay.
Coffee?
I'm representing, for those of you who are Leaf fans. If you guys are Montreal Canadian fans, my condolences.
Why, we're out?
No, Costy's pro-Leaf.
Oh.
Yeah, we're
I'm
not
pro
Montreal
whoever-
Canadian fans.
I'm pro whoever wins, as long as it's Canadian team.
Then the Leafs have a problem. They haven't won in 67 years, so.
And I know, I'm just wondering why you're still
Hey.
hopeful.
You know what? Gotta be hopeful about something, right?
True.
Well,
Okay, you know what? You guys are here now, so let's get going.
Hi, everybody.
And
hi.
Oh, you know what? I think Roxanne is in a workshop or something.
Yes, we know.
yeah, we know
Oh,
that.
okay.
And I'm going to try hard not to mute everybody. So if you can promise to be nice, we'll go through this conversation so we can have interaction with everyone. But if I find there's a lot of background noise and it's difficult for us to converse, then I'll have to put everyone on mute and then just raise your hand when you need to chat, okay? So let's try as it is. So anyway, I want to thank Ryan Charbonneau, and I have known each other for a number of years. He was formerly the partner at the Bennett Edge, which is an ODSP EO service provider. They've done some really good work with regard to helping people that have disabilities to obtain and maintain their employment. So I thought it'd be really helpful to get some sort of street level conversation going between myself and Ryan, just so that we can get our head around what this new business model is that we're going to have to deal with WCG. Because as everyone knows from all our conversations, we're not just looking at trying to help people find jobs, we need to help them retain jobs. So Bennett Edge has been doing that collectively. They have over 30 years of collective experience, and Ryan being a partner there, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to dealing with employers and dealing with clients that have disabilities and bringing those two folks together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just start off with a couple of slides, which are just introductory question slides that Ryan and I will go back on. And by all means, if you have specific questions, if you can put them in the chat box, that way I can just sort of manage it more easily. And then I can keep on feeding those questions to Ryan because I'll keep my eye on the chat box. So with that, I'm just gonna give the floor to Ryan, and maybe you can give us a little background about yourself beyond what I've just said.
Something to show you.
Thanks, David, and thanks for inviting me here today. Full disclosure, I'm a Leafs fan as well.
Oh my God.
Work to get that.
My man. See,
So
represent.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for having. I don't do professional. Well, this is going to be obvious pretty soon, but I don't do professional presentations or anything like that. I'm just here to talk about my experience. I do have a lot of experience, as David mentioned, working with Ontario Disability Supports Program in the employment supports in the GTA. Well, actually, Peel, Halton, Dufferin specifically. So this was my day-to-day job. I was in the thick of things. I've gone through changes to the program, very highly focused on the job development piece. So, finding job opportunities was our main focus that whole time. So I've seen and done a lot. I'm still learning every day. I know when I was coming to the office later on, it was, okay, now I've seen everything. And then as soon as I said that, something new happened that day. So to pick up on that, just working with persons with disabilities, I guess you can say we're looking at, under this new model, kind of this C-level client, someone who is facing some significant or maybe even insignificant barriers to employment, and my unique perspective from that point of view. So yeah, if we can just chat, please chime in. I really enjoy a dynamic conversation because you never know where it's going to lead. Yeah, and thanks for having me today.
No, I appreciate it very much. So why don't we just start with the first slide? And again, this just to give us a little bit of structure, and I'll keep on flipping back and forth with my. So that's really the first question we really want to get our head around. So maybe you can just give us a picture of what's a day in the life look like for you when you're trying to match, I say HTP just to keep it short, hard to place clients with employers' needs. What does it look like to you?
Okay. So building on what I just said, every day is different. And that's the unique and actually wonderful thing about it. You know, every day would bring new challenges, new opportunities. We'll get into that a little bit later on in a little bit more detail. But generally speaking, a lot of the things that I would do every day would be kind of common sense, or they would be, you know, what you would think are the basics. I mean, I don't know how everyone starts their day, but absolutely the first thing I would do coming in would be coming with the attitude to expect the unexpected. Get ready for some flexibility. Get ready for your day's priorities to shift and change. So the first thing to do is make sure I'm really up to date on all of my correspondence. And again, I know a lot of this is obvious, but it was really important for me to have this basic framework in place. So checking all the correspondence, emails, phone calls, everything, and then evaluating and finding out, okay, what's my top priority for the day? And then with me, interviews, obviously, #1 priority. Employer needs. Sometimes if a client is going through a difficult time, you know, obviously that would bump up on my priority list. But that would always be the first thing that I would look at, because often I would need to rely on some coworkers to step in. You know, maybe if I had an appointment but had to be somewhere else all of a sudden, I would work with them to make sure they could cover for me, and vice versa, that I could help them out. So it was really a team effort as well. But I had to know at the beginning of the day what that day would look like. Another thing that may be obvious that I would do, if an important event was coming up, you know, say the next day, maybe there was an interview the next day or an important appointment for a client, I would make sure I would contact them, even if they confirmed that they were going, contact them again just to make sure and just to confirm that, you know, they're still going, as a reminder about the appointment. And then that gives you the day to kind of work out any bugs that may have come up. Like maybe they'll say, oh, you know what, I forgot all about it. Yes, I want to be there, but you know, I can't make it because of this. And then at least you have some time to deal with that.
That never happens to us, Ryan, ever.
Oh,
Everyone shows up all the time.
well, that's wonderful.
Not quite. I'm looking at smiling faces like, yeah, really?
Yeah. And you know, that's really the best thing. And what I found working with our clients, I mean, we are a cross disability service provider. So we worked with every disability. And I did find that, you know, every day, every week, certain clients required more attention or support than others. So there were usually a handful of clients that needed my immediate attention for that period of time. And that's kind of where I was going with the flexibility each day. And then that would shift. So it was that constant change that I would be dealing with. So that's how I would start my day. For the job development piece of it, you know, I would, when I was approaching employers, I would look at different approaches like cold calling. I know it's a little different in this climate right now with the lockdown situation, but just going in and meeting with employers, I would plan my day out for that. And I would schedule times, if I was doing that, I would schedule times that were the most effective time to go for that particular employer. For example, in the restaurant industry, you don't want to show up at 12 o'clock at noon to try to speak to the manager because they're scrambling around, trying to deal with their lunch hour. And again, I know a lot of this is obvious, but over time, I found different ways for different industries. There were certain times of the day that worked better for those in-person visits, or quite frankly, even a phone call or email. There were certain times where I would get a better response. Does anyone have any questions about where I'm going with that and your typical day? I'm sure most of you are doing the same thing.
One thing that's going to be very non-typical for us is there's a brand new system coming into place through WCG, who's the service system manager, called CaseFlow, and we're going to get trained on it over the next number of weeks. And basically, it's an online case management system whereby instead of filling out forms and hard copies, which we used to do before COVID, we're going to be doing that on an ongoing basis, which all goes into one centralized database. So, any advice you can give with regard to making sure that you're tracking information with your employers and your clients?
Yes, absolutely. Just set aside time every day. Just block off a certain period of time to make sure that all your documentation, case notes, and everything is just kept up to date. One thing I did find is that at first I thought, oh, I'll remember that. I'll just, I don't really have time for that right now. I'll get to it later on. And then by the time you do sit down and enter the case notes, you find that a lot of that information is gone, or just you're so far behind that, you're just not able to catch up. So my strategy was to devote a certain amount of time every day, block that off, and use it for documentation. You'll be so much happier if you implement that, and so much more effective.
I'm just moving along, and again, this will just get other people's juices going in terms of what questions they have. But how do you generate or screen your hard to place clients? Especially in this situation right now, too, are organizations like the Bennett Edge, are they having no difficulty finding clients and screening them, or?
Yeah, well, in terms of that, I found like a really good way of screening and generating new clients it was really word of mouth. We found that there is a really strong network with family members, and that if their child or relative had a good experience with our organization, they were in touch with lots of other families that they were, that had relationships with for other things. And word of mouth was a really good way of generating new referrals, for sure. And then with your referral agency, to make sure you have a really good relationship with them as well. Yeah.
And we've called Mike at the Bennett Edge and said, if there's people that you have, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people coming forward knowing that the government is having a lot of money available to people that are in a disability situation to help them find work. And there's going to be a lot of people coming forward looking for help. So
yeah. Great. Yeah. We found even like organizations like even sports teams, charities, other placement agencies, just the networking aspect worked really well for us.
This will seem a little bit mechanical right now, but I'm going to be opening it up to the floor. So one of the key questions is, how do you work together with community partners to support hard to place clients? Because one of the things that we've been giving the mandate to do with WCG, and Grace and Sylvia Martinez are building a database to flesh it out, to give us a list of all the community partners we should be in contact with based on their expertise, whether it's March of Dimes, the Bennett Edge, or whoever. But how do you work when you're with the Bennett Edge, how did you work together with community partners to support your clients?
Yeah, it's, again, everything today seems to go back to relationships and having good relationships. You'll find there are key people within every organization that tend to be action-oriented people that you can develop relationships with, and to really know what those other organizations specialize in and how that specialization can complement your services. And there were so many partnerships we had with other organizations in the community that worked really well for both of us. You know, we worked with VPI, for example, March of Dimes, Center for Education and Training, all these, and Supported Housing and Peel, all these other organizations where we were able to complement our unique skill sets to help the client. Yeah, so, you know, but it was having relationships with individuals in those organizations that could make things happen, and knew about our strengths as well.
And that's the one thing we're doing right now. We're reaching out to these organizations and just letting them know, A, who we are. Most of them will know that because we've been around for 67 years, but B, how we'd like to work with them to be able to support and find new clients. Because again, with the complement of clients that we're dealing with, if we had 100 clients in total, 50 of those will have to be C clients or hard to place clients. So our energies are being driven towards getting more C clients, but also serving and helping those people get into jobs and retaining those jobs too.
I will say on that note, it's important for us to establish boundaries, even though we had those relationships. It was really important for us to establish boundaries with those other organizations so everyone knew what their role was in supporting the client. Because if there were some gray areas or some crossover, sometimes we were just, you know, working against each other without even realizing it, or the client would be confused. Who do I go to for this? Who do I go for that? So to establish clear boundaries and clear responsibilities was really, really helpful.
And when you have these partnerships, sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
When you have these partnerships, would they be formalized partnerships? Would you actually sign documents to say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what you're going to do? Or would it be a handshake or just an email?
Yeah, it was informal. We didn't have any formal agreements in place at all. Yeah. Now, occasionally the client would have to go through their formal process as far as the client was concerned to be able to access services with them. But between organizations, no, it was more informal.
Brian, sorry to interject. What's preventing other service providers from just signing them up prior to any agreement with you know, who's going where? Because a lot of the organizations may just sign them up ahead of time, and then, you know, Costi could be working with them and they're already registered with the other organization. I mean, what is preventing providers from saying, okay, you know, let's work together here, compared to I'm going to take the clients because we need them as much as you do? Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I'm not sure how it's working with this new model. My experience is more with the previous model. But I think that would be filtered out through your system service manager intake and referral process, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, they will help to make sure that the client is going to the service provider that your systems manager has decided is the best fit for them. I don't know if that answers your question. I know with ODSP employment supports, as it existed, it would, you know, we'd have to make sure they qualified for ODSP employment supports by asking them and filtering through, you know, are you part of any other program that would disqualify you from working with this program? But I think under the new model, just with the level C, the system service manager will be making sure that doesn't happen.
Okay.
And when you were with, again, going back to the Bennett Edge, would you do referrals out? Like, for instance, would there be certain situations and certain clients that are so hard to place that you'd have to work in conjunction with another agency to be able to help them get through?
Yes, I mean, we would help them with their job placement, but we would work with other agencies to support needs that they had maybe outside of work, but yet those needs impacted their work. So say like maybe some mental health issues that they were dealing with that was outside of our purview, but still impacted their ability to work. We would work with an organization that was with them to help them more with the personal side of things.
Right, right.
So we work together in conjunction in those
One of the
situations.
things that we do in a big way too is we have a lot of information sessions that we hold for different organizations and partners so that they can come and display all the services they provide, whether it's the Canadian Mental Health Association or whatever. But would you do those sorts of things where you actually bring in organizations so that they can come together with your clients and talk about the services they provide?
Yes, we would. Sometimes things would come up where, say, a volunteer experience would be something that would help them with their employability, or might be a good interim step for them to get some work experience. And but we wouldn't, we didn't set up any volunteer placements ourselves. So we bring in volunteer organizations to come in and talk to our clients and work with them in that aspect.
Okay.
So they could get that volunteer experience, but still be our client. And we could work with those organizations to make sure they're working towards their goal of paid employment.
I've got two questions here. One's from Slava, and she asks, when you refer clients to other organizations, do you help them to book the initial appointment through your contact, or do you leave it with the client to contact the organization?
Yeah, most of the times we would help them with information gathering, like here are some organizations that might be a good fit for you or that do what you're looking for. And then we would leave it to the client to take those steps. Yeah, so, we would give the client resources, but it would be really under their initiative to do the application and the rest of the process.
And Karen asks, how long do you usually work with clients that are referred from ODSP or WSIB or OW? How long are the files open and active with you from intake to registration?
Yeah, so for our ODSP clients, if they were on income supports, we work with them for 33 months. If they weren't, we work with them for 15 months. Yeah, we didn't work with OW. I don't have a lot of experience with OW. And yeah, my primary specialty is ODSP employment support services. So 33 months is a very long time. And I know they're looking at shortening that, though, in terms of retention to maybe a 12-month period. But yeah, we certainly saw a lot of changes. And sometimes with clients, they would work in 4, 5, 6 different jobs over that time period. So
Right.
Yeah, quite a process.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, certainly WCG wants us, again, not just to help people find jobs, but keep the jobs. And part of our compensation will be, in fact, paid for performance based on how long and how many people we can actually have them retain in jobs for 3, 6, and 12 months.
Yeah.
So, we have a motivation to get that money so we can provide more services, hire more people, do more things. And they're obviously being rewarded the same way with the ministry too.
Yeah. To go back, I can see there's a question here from Slava. Have you been going to interviews with clients for additional support? So if I can go back to that question,
Sure.
Yes and no. What was important to us was for the client to decide. We found that when our clients were taking the lead, they would take ownership with their whole job search process. And, I didn't want them to feel forced about any step in the process. Some of them were dealing with anxiety and other issues, in terms of advocating on their behalf. So if they wanted us to come to the interview, then I would go with them. And, or if I felt the employer wanted me to be there, I would mention it to the client. So, you know what, I might not say anything, but the employer would really like me to be there with you in order to answer questions about what kind of support our agency can offer. Would you be okay if I came with you? And I would also highlight that I could give them like raw feedback about their interview skills. So if I'm there with them, the great thing is afterwards, I can tell them exactly how I felt they did during the interview. Because to get that kind of feedback from an employer is very difficult.
True. Yeah.
In fact, in many cases, they can't really say how they felt. So even just that feedback alone can be a huge step towards securing the next job, in the next interview. So I liked to go when I could, but I always left it with the client to decide.
And I guess you'd have to prepare the employer to help them realize that you're going to have to be a part of this picture. It's almost like the helicopter parents sort of thing, sitting in on a job interview with their child, but it's not, it's necessary. It's necessary.
I got thrown out of a car dealership when I just showed up to support the client because I didn't know I was going to be there until the last minute. The client called me and said, "Look, I'm really nervous. Can you come to support me?" The employer didn't know about me. They had scheduled the interview. I showed up and they threw me out of the dealership. So it's always good for the employer to be aware that you are coming.
Yeah.
But then I guess another question, and in other situations it's worked out too, but yeah, it's always best that they are aware, especially in this age with protocols and safety protocols and whatnot.
Right.
But,
Right.
yeah.
So Hara has a question. He asks, what are the main challenges that you face from employers for placing clients with disabilities, and how do you handle them? That's the golden question.
Yeah. The main challenges I face with employers are they have a preconception about what disability means. I would say that's the biggest barrier. Most people, when you mention disability, will think about mobility issues. Most people think about someone in a wheelchair who requires physical accommodations, or they've had an experience in the past that didn't work out for whatever reason, and they kind of stereotype, if that makes sense, that someone with a disability means X, without being aware necessarily of, there is no definition, and everybody's different. Everybody has different strengths, and so to get beyond their preconceptions, I would say would be the biggest barrier. With another barrier I faced was the thought that, this is going to cost me a lot of money. To hire someone, it's going to be expensive, or or my production won't be what I need it to be. And again, I'm just saying something objections that I've faced in the past. With large organizations, it might be you have buy-in from HR, or the head office of an organization says, we really want to work with your program, we really want to hire your clients. And then the local manager or the direct supervisor, the person making the hiring decision, may not be on board with HR. It might just be, yeah, I know we're supposed to do this as a company, but you know what, I'm just not going to hire this person for whatever reason. And sometimes there was a huge disconnect with large organizations from their head office and the store or organization at the local level. So really, to get around those issues is really, again, it sounds simple, but be passionate about what you do. And a really important thing too is to know your client. My approach really most of the time became, when I would approach an employer, it would be for one specific client that I had in mind for that employer, to know everything I could about that client, including that client's strengths, knowing how those strengths could fit with the organization and their needs for whatever position they were hiring, and to really believe in that client when I walked through the front door or contacted the employer, because they can tell if you're not passionate about it or you don't believe in your client, they can tell right away. And a lot of employers are approached by dozens and dozens of organizations every week for various things. So they're very good at shutting down quickly. But if they see that you really believe and that you really mean what you say and you've done your homework, that can get you a long way past that.
Good answer. And here's a question just before we go to Karen's question, but I have to, in my mind, when I'm dealing with somebody who has a disability, and I have to obviously believe there's some incentive dollars attached to it, what happens when you run out of incentive money? How difficult is it to place people with disabilities?
Yeah, well, that's a big issue right now. You know, wage subsidies and incentives are a big issue. I know there's a lot of debate within the community around that. But if you don't have any wage incentives available, the best thing to do is to go in and just, as I said, focus on the strengths of your client and show the employer that, you know, this is good for your business from a business model perspective. Mm-hmm. You know, here's what this client brings, and this is how it's going to help your organization. But be mindful of the employer's needs. Mm-hmm. So not go in with the approach, well, you should hire my client because it's the right thing to do, generally speaking. No, you should hire my client because they are a great fit for your organization, and they're going to help your business thrive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, and be mindful of their business needs, because employers are watching every penny, every dollar right now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Question for
sorry. So to go back to your question, you know, hopefully it's the right fit. Doing your homework, making sure that it's the right fit, that those strengths that your client possesses are exactly what the employer needs for that role. And then things like disability or barriers just become a non-issue.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever run into situations where, in fact, you're trying very hard to solve, let's say you've placed somebody who has a disability, and after a month or two, they're struggling, but they don't want you to contact the employer because they figure that's going to just make things worse. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, great question. So what we do and what I recommend is when someone is hired, during that, have your client contact you after their first shift, to not wait. The first day is really important. That's a really good indicator on how things are going. And hopefully you have a relationship with your client before that where they feel comfortable talking to you about issues and concerns that they have. Sometimes that can take a long time to establish that kind of trust, but it's important if you can do it prior to them starting their employment. And just have them check in with you after your first shift and really listen to them. And even if they say, yeah, everything's fine, you know, listen to their tone, ask follow-up questions and really probe to make sure that everything is okay. Because just people in general are very reluctant to say, I don't understand, because they don't want to look foolish. We don't want to look foolish. We're just starting a job. So yeah, it is important that you're there, because there may be some things that they really don't want to ask their employer. But to let them know, I'm here to support you. Be as open as you can be. Please tell me, you know, how's it going? How's your first day? Is there anything you need? And then the first week itself is also very important. So to make sure to not wait too long before you follow up with them again. Right. And then over time, the longer time goes, the less you really need to follow up with them. That's a basic trend. Or it may be in the future, you're only talking to them once a month, and then they call you to say, oh, I have a new manager and everything's changed and I'm having some problems. And then, you know, you start the process all over again. But communication over the first day and the first week is, I would say, is critical. Yeah.
Do you find that most clients, if you had 10 clients, would most of them be responsive and get back to you with a check-in the first day?
Sometimes I would say maybe 60% would. The other 40% might require a little bit more, like some more nudging, some more probing, an extra phone call or text.
Right.
But yeah, after that second attempt, most of the clients would respond.
Right, right.
We worked with a lot of clients too who would communicate with us every day during their job search, and then as soon as they were hired, they wouldn't talk to us again because for whatever reason, either they felt, okay, now I'm working, I don't need your service anymore, and that caused them problems later on because it was important for us to tell them that the support, only getting the job is only part of the support, that keeping the job or maintaining your job is just as important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for them to know that we were here for them.
And that's incredibly devastating too. I mean, finding a job, great, but if you bounce and all of a sudden you're back in the market in 2 or 3 months, that's depressing for anyone, whether you have a disability or not.
Yeah.
Karen asked a question. She says, sorry, is there a question? Oh, I thought somebody asked a question. Karen's asking, what are some of the supports given to clients in the pre-placement interview period that is given by your agency staff for PWDs to assess client employability and to prepare individuals for the placement phase? So,
yeah. Okay, supports given, so pre-placement interview period. Okay, so for the pre-placement period, really we had a pretty thorough assessment that we would do. We would try to have multiple staff members present for that intake to get different perspectives, and really encourage again the client to open up and go beyond answering the standard questions in terms of accommodations or time commitments, disability related stuff, to go beyond that and really probe, ask questions like, how motivated are you to work, or what is your primary motivation to work? Like, the intangible questions can bring up discussions that are vital but may not be included in the standard evaluation. So just really probe and really talk, obviously you're not going to ask questions that are going to make them uncomfortable, but you do really want to get a sense of motivation. That's particularly important. A few clients that we spoke to said, you know what, I don't even want to work, but my mom or dad wants me to get out of the house. And when that comes up, I mean, that might not be a standard question, but once you hear that, okay, so now I know that if a client isn't motivated to work and someone's forcing them to do something, you need to take a completely different approach, because no matter how much you do, if they don't want to do it, it may be a waste of everyone's time, but at least where to focus your efforts at the beginning. Okay, let's talk more about that and how can we deal with that, and so on and so forth. So having a really good intake meeting, if you can have more than one staff member there, great, and really going beyond the basic questions to really find out as much as possible about the client, their motivation, and anything else that might impact their ability to work. Interview period, we tended not to have workshops or general group sessions for pre-employment stuff. It was interview skills were done prior to a real interview happening. So that way we were able to customize it to that specific job. So for example, someone has an interview at Tim Hortons, then we would schedule some time before that interview to sit down, say, okay, these are some questions you might get asked at Tim Hortons for your interview that's, a few days from now. And to sit down with them and really role play, ask them those questions, and be very attentive to their responses, and to be open and say, you know what, you're saying all the right things, but actually your tone of voice you sound like you're not very enthusiastic, or whatever, or I found that if sometimes we would do that right before their actual interview. So meet with us first. We're going to practice your interview skills. And then right after that, you're going to go into the interview.
Right, right.
So we'd be done off site, you know, in a coffee place or something that's close by, or whatever means. So that way it was fresh in their minds and it was customized and specific to that job. I found that was more effective than a generalized interview workshop. But you know, that's just what I found. I can see both being really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Like to know your general skills, to know responses to some common questions, and then customize it right before your actual interview. So yeah, so that's what we would do. I found that to be very, very effective.
What about the volume of clients that you're serving in a given year? How many would you serve in a year?
Yeah, on my caseload, I tend to have about 35 active job seekers at any given time. And, you know, that would fluctuate. But really, it would be 5 or 10 that for whatever period I was working with all of them, there would be 5 or 10 that would have most of my attention for that given time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, based on their preparedness, based on the market, based on opportunities. Yeah, so yeah, it was really up to them.
If you were serving 35 in a year, how many of those would be, I don't know how to put this, a serial employee, which means they get one job, it doesn't work out. After 2-3 months, they have to find another job and another job. Would many of them be repeating in a given year, or would they be retained for 12 months, at least 12 months?
Yeah, I'd say it would be about half and half.
Yeah.
Some of our clients, though, would work for 2 weeks, need to take a break, they'd quit, they'd come back, work for another 2 weeks, quit and come back. And that was difficult to manage under the financial supports and guidelines we had from the ministry. But, you know, others would just be so independent that they would require very little support, so it kind of balanced itself out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Question from Sylvia Lebecki as opposed to Martinez. What are the most common techniques to engage the clients and keep them motivated towards employment? Sylvia, do you mean during employment or before they get employed?
No, during employment.
During employment, okay.
So to achieve employment, and then it can be both, actually.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is kind of tied together, because when I was talking about taking the time to find their motivation at the intake, that can carry you through to keeping their job after they're hired. Once you have that established, it's a really effective tool. So it's having them visualize their goal. Why are they doing this? Why are they motivated? And to remind them of that and keep them focused on that goal. Sometimes their expectation of the job is completely different. So they get bored easily at work. It's not the job that they thought it was. You know, it may be something where they didn't get their break that day, so they decided to quit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, stuff like that. So that ties back into making sure that they're in touch with you after their first shift, during the first week, just to make sure that, okay, yeah, they have a sense of what the job is really all about from a practical standpoint, and they're okay with it, or maybe they have some concerns, and then you can help them address those concerns before they snowball into larger issues.
Right.
Keep them motivated. I mean, we've had individuals who say, you know what, I'm not happy at my job anymore. I've been there for 6 months. I want a completely new career. And then the motivation might be actually outside of their current job, and say, you know what, it's much easier to get a new job when you're working. So their motivation becomes, for their current job becomes, actually, you know, if I continue working at my current job, that's going to help me get the other job that I want. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to move forward.
Can we go back to that? You mentioned about 35 active job seekers. Is that at any given month you'd have 35 active job seekers?
Yeah, so Yeah, I had as a job developer had approximately 30 to 35 clients at any given time that I was working on with. So, you know, as they were hired, they'd be replaced by some more, and it was just sort of a more or less an active caseload. Yeah.
Question from Sylvia. How many second career applications do you process for these clients in a year?
Yeah, well, I actually didn't do any of those. So we didn't do any second career applications. So
Come join us at Costi. You'll do lots.
That makes us happy.
you know, I have heard horror stories about second career applications. So
Oh, yes.
yes.
It's
They're
a
quite-
mixed blessing. We're very good at it, which is a problem because we become a magnet for many other agencies who clearly do not want to do that for their clients because it's very time intensive.
Right.
And
We can train them. Yeah.
exactly.
And we'll charge.
Yeah, I
Make
was gonna
extra
say,
money.
for a price,
Yes.
nothing for free.
But that's so really second career doesn't factor into the disability, the individuals that you're serving that are disabled.
No, but the only thing I can say to that is that might be to have these extra services available might be also a way to attract more clients if they know that you have all of these other services available too. You know, that will help generate new clients potentially. But yeah, I have no experience with that. And I will try to avoid second career applications if I can in the future, based on your recommendation.
It's wise. It's wise. Slava asks a very good question. She says, big employers have quotas to meet for hiring people with disabilities. Do you have maybe contacts with these employers that you can share with us?
Ooh. Right. So yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can talk to David afterwards about some people to contact. Yeah, big employers are great. Again, sometimes you'll get people who they do have quotas and they are interested in working with programs like ours, and they can help you through the pre-screening process or work with a recruiter to maybe flag some of your clients to get an interview, but then sometimes it falls apart after that. But it is helpful to have those contacts for sure. So I can share some of those with David after to distribute.
Yeah.
I know the banks in particular have been really good in the GTA. Organizations like Home Depot have been pretty good. But again, it really depends. It really depends on the franchisee. It really depends on the local supervisor, I think you'll find. But it is nice to have the support of the head office, definitely.
Right. And Tahar asked the question, having two staff persons in the initial intake meeting could make the client uncomfortable, especially if they're a person with disability. What has been your experience in that, having two staff persons in the initial intake meeting?
Yeah, I didn't find that to be like in my experience, that wasn't really ever an issue that I know of. But sometimes, you know, that's a great point. I would encourage, if you're going to have two people, to say, just ask, you know, are you okay if both of us sit in? You know, just common courtesy, and that way that can take care of that for you. And if they're uncomfortable, but we have had situations though where a client is more comfortable with one of us than the other, and then it might be a question of having a discussion and maybe switching roles, like who is working with this client based on how comfortable they were with that individual. Sometimes, you know, through no fault of your own, you can be a trigger for them for whatever reason, or they don't mix well with your communication style. So that's happened before as well. Some people just work well with certain personality sets. So yeah, I would just ask them.
Question. just looking at two questions. Sorry. How many clients, Karen's asking, how many clients do you need to start with in order to have an active caseload of 35 active clients that are going to the job placement phase with you?
Yeah, that's just something that evolved over time. And, you know, when I first started out, I think I had 5 active clients. And just over time, we as an organization just got busier and busier. So that just increased over the years. And at the beginning too, I was doing everything, including I was doing job coaching, you know, job development, intake, retention, everything. And by doing a little bit of everything at the beginning, I found that that was really helpful later on to understand how all those different roles work. But yeah, it took years and years of building up placements. And of course, when you have 33 months of retention, every year exponentially, you know, you're doubling up on clients, you're increasing your caseload. And over that 3-year period, again, clients would probably have at least 2 or 3 jobs. So they would come back into your active caseload. And yeah, so it's just cumulative over time, I would say, to get to that level. I mean, anything over that might be unmanageable, to be honest. I was lucky with that, in that most of the clients I was working with did not require a lot of support. So in that respect, it was manageable. But if you're working with a lot of high needs clients, I would not recommend anything close to 35 active clients at a time, because you're just not going to be able to service them.
Interesting. Yeah.
Good one.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, we do the best we can with what we have to do, but it would be difficult, I think.
And on that point of spending time with clients to support them, how long is the initial intake process and documentation? In other words, how long would it take to do the intake interview of a client?
Yeah.
So what?
Oh, yeah. So the intake interview would take about an hour and a half. And it would just be an hour and a half of going through some basic questions, like kind of like we are today, but then going off on, you know, whatever comes up and finding out more about them. One thing we did really emphasize was to get back quickly. So when we would get a referral, we would make sure that we would contact the client within the same day if we could. Set up the intake meeting as soon as we could. That just overall, I don't know why, but it's helpful to have a quick response. It shows your client, demonstrates that you're really there to support them and it's important to you. We would sit down with the client. Yeah, it usually took about an hour and a half. And then there might be a follow-up meeting after, but after that initial meeting, we usually had enough information to just start their job search.
Right. And that's a really important question, because we got to factor that into our daily lives to see how much time we can allocate to each individual. And when we talk about hard to place people, of course, we're only talking about one sliver right now, just people with disabilities, not necessarily newcomers with language barriers or people that are young, youth at risk and so forth. So yeah, that's an hour and a half. Okay.
The other thing is, would that include documentation, or is there, like, my question is a 2-part question. The actual documentation, because you would need their information in order to put into the system. Would you do that, or the admin, or who would take on that responsibility? And then I know the initial intake, the interview, I would call it, is the employment consultant or the BL or whoever it's assigned to. So mine is the initial stage as admin.
Yes. Generally speaking, so when we would meet with the client for that hour and a half, the person meeting with that client would, or, you know, if there are 2 of you, one of them would be taking notes as you're speaking to them. So it would be filling out some of the documentation right there on the spot. There were documents that needed to be signed and filled out as well, so that served that purpose. But then sometimes as well, there would be follow-up after that. You would just do a documentation that you just do independently afterwards, like maybe some case notes or whatever about your meeting. but most of the documentation would take place during the meeting, like the filling out stuff and information.
Now, would this be hard copy, or would you have access to a system like CAMS or sent, like,
Yeah,
where would you enter that information? Would that happen there or afterwards?
yeah. So we would just have a laptop or something with us, enter all the information, but the hard copy would be printed out after.
Okay.
And then there would be like a follow-up meeting, like a brief follow-up meeting with the client to get their signatures. Or,
Okay.
you know, whenever the next time was that you met with them, you would go over all of the documentation as a hard copy and have them sign off on it and make any adjustments that were necessary at that point.
And that hard copy would be actually saved like in a file, actual
Yes,
manual. Okay.
yes, that's right, yes. Yeah.
Because eventually, Sylvia, we're going to be moving to electronic. Almost everything is going to be electronic. So we're going to have to sort of get into that mode. But that's going to
Yeah.
take time before we evolve into that.
Yeah.
Did
But in
that
the
also,
meantime,
did that also address your other question about, because you mentioned about what support do you receive from the admin person?
yeah. So
Okay.
what support do you receive from the admin, or how do you, is the admin involved with the client, with the staff? Like, how do they
Yeah.
support you or involved with you?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So we were, okay. So for our ODSP employment supports contract, I think we had the largest contract in the region, partly because we only dealt with ODSP employment supports. But we had a pretty high quota each year, placement quota, pretty high caseload. But we made a point of just not having very many staff, which had its own challenges. So our way is not necessarily the best way, but it was pretty effective. So the good thing about not having too many people involved with each client was the client knew who they should contact. They were familiar with you. And, you know, our focus on job development meant that they would work with the job developer for most of their time. So they would work directly with one job developer. So there's one point of contact. The administrative person would help out to make sure that a lot of the information was entered, you know, on the SMS and on the systems, and would help with things like resume writing, online applications. So anything to do with, and we would have those roles clarified with the client so they would know, okay, if I have a question about this, I would contact the administrative person. If I had a question about that, I would contact my job developer. So we had that outlined, and that would even be in their intake plan. Also, we had a roles and responsibilities sheet that we had developed, clarifying what our roles are and what the client's roles are in the job search process. And it outlined who to contact for, you know, during each step of the way. And it was really nice to have that on paper. And they would also be clear about what their responsibilities were, because a lot of people would just sort of disappear after the intake. And it was hard for us to manage that, like follow up with everybody who we're not hearing from, because we were focused on things that were happening. And some people kind of got, I'm not saying lost, but they moved down the priority list because they just weren't participating when they could have been more active. So when they look at their roles and responsibilities, when we follow up with them, we can say, okay, how's it going with, you know, have you found any job leads, or, you know, where are you in this step of the process? And we let them know from the beginning that it was very much their job search, and as much as they put into it, you know, they would get out of it. And it was important for them to participate as well.
Just one last question. So this would be also for follow-up. Would you do a 3, 6, 12-month follow-up? Would that be part of the daily routine, or monthly, or every 6 months?
Okay. At the beginning, yes. But we did decide to create a role of a retention specialist. And the retention specialist looked after all of all retention for all of our clients.
Oh, that's a good.
Yeah, so again, it was clear too, so the clients say, okay, you're working with the job developer until you're hired. But as soon as you're hired, now you're working directly with the retention specialist. So, and the retention specialist would do the monitoring, check in with the employer and the client, but also arrange any job coaching or supports that might be required. And it was nice for our retention specialist to be able to look after all of that.
Yeah, and give the other consultants a break, so to speak, that they don't have to.
Yeah.
Oh.
And, you know, yeah, and if that role wasn't there, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs as job developers. It just, you know, it got
Because
so
you need
hard.
that.
Yeah. And the retention specialist too was aware of the importance of the employer. So when they were following up with the employers and the clients, they could, you know, sometimes they would find job leads just by virtue of engaging with the employer. Hey, how's so-and-so doing? How's business? You know, oh, I see you might be hiring.
You create that rapport with the employer.
Yeah, you might be hiring this role next month. Let me go back and talk to our team and see if we might have a great person for you, you know, stuff like that. So they can actually do some of the job development for you indirectly. The 3, the 6, and the 12-month period, to answer that question, we found was completely ineffective. Too much happened between, like, from the day they were hired to the 3-month mark, there's way too much going on to wait for 3 months. So as I mentioned before, the first week, the first day, and then we just instituted a whole, we're going to check in every month because 3 months is just too long a period, we found.
You lose the contact, or you lose the momentum.
Absolutely. And then so many times it's like, oh yeah, I quit my job 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know, why didn't you tell us? Or, you know, and sometimes they've got so much going on in their lives, you know, and they don't know how everything works. I mean, we do because we do it every day, but you just lost a job and it's so much harder to find a new job. And then maybe they've just walked off their job without including you in the process. So maybe they burnt that bridge. You know, maybe the employer might be more reluctant to work with you in the future based on that experience. But if you don't know what's going on, it's hard for you to manage all of those things. So I found the 1 month mark was good. We could generally catch everything in a timely manner every 4 weeks.
Okay.
And on that note too, just with regard to follow up, we are going to be on Tuesday when we have our Consti-Peel implementation planning meeting. We'll be talking about some of the metrics that WCG expects us to do in terms of following up with A's versus B's versus C's over time to make sure that we do what we can to keep in contact with them and to help build their retention on the job. So that'll be one of the things we talk about.
Retention, sorry to jump in, but retention is so important. It's so important. It's such a key element to everything. And I know when I started, I was focused on just get the job. But over time, I found out, well, keeping the job is so important. You know, because once your client is working, it's so difficult to stop and start all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the topic of jobs, Tahar asked a question, generally, what jobs would you recommend for clients with mental health issues based on your experience? Any particular area?
Yes. Okay. Well, not to have them in a job where there's a lot of pressure. Of course, it varies from individual to individual. You know, that's a really, really good question. I found more recently that, and again, this is just because the question is general, generally speaking, jobs where there's a level of independence and flexibility with their schedule works really well. So things like, we've had individuals work for like food delivery or parts delivery or something where you know, you're in your own vehicle and you're kind of your own boss. You're not, you know, you have the flexibility to kind of do your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I found that's been helpful. Or, you know, in some of those jobs as well, you can kind of establish when you're available for the next week's schedule. So if you're having a difficult time, you can change your availability for that week or two and then come back and open it up again when you're feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely situations though where you're just stuck in one place, you're in a pressure cooker situation. You've got lots of customers, say, coming to you all the time, or lots of deadlines, and maybe environments where they're not very considerate, your communication.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really vary from place to place too. You could have two of the exact same companies with different personnel and different managers and have a completely different situation. So
Exactly.
I don't know if that helps, but it is, you know, it's, does that answer your question, or did you have a follow-up question with that?
Well, I think that's.
I know it's hard to generalize.
No, I think, Ryan, thank you. Yeah, I think, because I think, yeah, you mentioned flexibility and those kinds of things, because with this new model, it will be a new experience for us as well. We have had clients in the past with, you know, with such issues, especially we're dealing mostly with the Ontario Works clients. And I can see, because of this financial stress and family stress, those issues. But I think, because in terms of mental health, I mean, depending on what their skill set is, I mean, maybe warehouse jobs or those kinds of jobs might work as well, because as long as there are no physical issues, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, just, you know, you're just lifting, or you're just doing you're on an assembly line, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're allowed to be more of yourself, like you're given some flexibility. You know, you're not portraying a role in front of everybody all the time. You can, and it's more of a relaxed atmosphere, right? It's a little more accommodating in that way.
Brian, I have a question as well.
Thank you.
Are you done, Saad?
Yes,
Okay.
Go ahead, Felix. Go ahead.
Okay. So have you ever, I'm sure you probably worked with clients that, you know, came and saw you and then became secret agents. So how did you connect with these clients that have become like lost contacts? What types of strategies did you do to try to connect with them?
Right. So you don't mean secret agents literally, right?
No, figure of speech. You know, they come in and then poof.
Yeah.
They go off the grid.
Yeah, absolutely. And that did happen quite often. And actually, though, that's a good indicator that they may not be ready to work right now, to be honest. You know, if that's happening with an employer, you know, maybe they're not going to last very long. An employer's not going to be as forgiving if they can't contact their employee, or an employee goes, you know, disappears for a short period of time. So, you know, when we met with them during the intake, we would find out their preferred method of contact. And believe it or not, something as simple as that can make a big difference. I worked with one client who refused to answer her phone or respond to voicemail or email, but she was fine with text. And that's the only way that she would communicate. And, you know, and she disappeared for a while, and I left voicemail after voicemail and email. And then eventually she got in touch with us through her own initiative after quite a while, and by text, to say, like, this is the way. And it's like, why didn't you respond? And she said, I only text. It could be something as simple as that, you know, that's their preferred mode of communication. But, you know, if they're not responding, then you need to make a decision as to whether or not to continue working with them at this point.
Can I tie in? That's actually related to the question that I initially asked you, because you said you have a caseload of 35. And my question originally was, like, in order for you to keep a caseload of 35, you might have had 70. So I'm not sure, like, if you get clients right from the get-go, if I'm a client and I sign up with Bennett Edge, do I become a client of yours right away from the sound of it? You're working with me from A to Z. So you're doing my intake and you're assessing me and you're checking my employability, whether I'm ready or not, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's what I'm asking. From the time that I become your client or I call your organization,
Yeah.
like how many have called, and a lot of them may not even become a client, right? So from A to Z, was it 70 clients? Was it like 80 in order for you to keep a caseload of active 35 clients for the placement part?
Right.
That's my question.
Yeah, okay. So as we are a cross disability service provider, over the years we found that a different percentage of our clientele would have different barriers. Found over the last, I'd say 6 to 10 years, or in that period, most of our clients were mental health clients. Just because maybe there was more awareness or whatever, most of the clients that we were working with. So we go through the same process. We go through it. Basically, if someone was motivated to work and they met with us in an intake, and as long as there wasn't another critical step that they needed to take before they began competitive employment, we would work with them. We would start the process. Sometimes people would be very gung-ho at the beginning, and in the intake everything looked good and everything was going well, and then something happened 2 months in where that changed. It's a really hard metric. Like we didn't take a lot of time to measure all of these things. It was more anecdotal, but it would fluctuate with, so it wouldn't even be that a client is ready to work today and then we close them. It would be ready to work today, maybe 2 months down the line, they're not ready for a month, then they're ready again. So really hard to measure that in terms of like 70 and 35, if that makes sense. But sometimes there would be something like as simple as a medication change, and that would take weeks to process. Like some clients had difficulty with medication changes, and they needed time to adjust before they went back to work. Or things like traveling overseas for 2 months, which isn't happening now. So we would put them on hold, but wait for them to come back. So as I said in the beginning, there's a lot of fluctuation. Every day was very different, and from individual to individual, from day to day, just a lot of ups and downs.
Good. No, these are really good questions. And again, we had very staid questions that we were going to start with. There were some other questions here that came up. One specifically from one that had some very good questions about some statistics. I'm wondering if I can I say that to last? Because it maybe it's something I send you in an email, and then you can come back to us with some statistics that would be helpful. Sorry, while I'm scrolling here.
Just while you're doing that, David, just one more point to Karen.
Please, yeah.
If you can, try to have an open discussion with that client. It's, what's going on? Like, I know you're ready when we met and everything. Has anything changed? And do you need some time? Should we close your file for the time being? And, and what do you need to do in the meantime to get ready for work? And then maybe we can open it up again then, and that it's not, a lot of our clients felt that they might lose their income supports if they don't go along with their job search process. A lot of it was just not having the right information. So they were reluctant to tell us, I'm actually not ready right now, because they were afraid of being penalized for telling us that. But once they understood that, no, we want to wait until you are ready. That's important. What do you need to do? And to have a plan.
So that's a question we had as a staff, and I actually put it up. And we as staff, we need to know what happens to people's income support, their ODSP income support, CPP disability if they're earning, if they decide to go to part-time or full-time employment, we can't be helping people blindly, right? We need to know, because some may be reluctant to even accept a part-time or full-time position because they have the steady income that they may be losing part or all of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Karen, that did come up quite a lot. Some individuals are very aware of the formula for income supports, that they could earn, you know, so much, and if they were working full-time, that meant that all of their income supports would disappear. But if they only work part-time or work 12 hours a week instead of 40, they could keep most of their income supports and the part-time income and actually be almost in the same financial situation at the end of the month. And even though the purpose of the program was, no, the purpose is to find employment. If you can work full-time, you know, let's find you a full-time job and you can move on. But some individuals are just, you know, very aware of the situation, and it's like, no, I only want to work 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week, and that's it. So only look for part-time employment, and that was tied directly into the impact that had on their income supports. CPP clients as well, they could only earn around $5,000 a year before they lose their CPP. And you know, we had to have discussions with our clients. I mean, formally, we're not supposed to factor any of this stuff in, but some clients were very aware of this. And, you know, and it's actually a good thing that they brought it up, that was a concern, so we could try to work around it.
But should we be aware of it, or should the client, like what Karen said, we would need training to find out, you know, the financial aspect, how would it affect them if they work full-time or part-time? And that's one. And for them, have you ever declined a client and said, you know what, we're not going to do the intake, or we're going to wait until you're ready? Job searching. So that referral, do you send it back to where? Do you send back the referral to saying inappropriate or not appropriate at this time?
Yeah, I would say whenever that happened, it would be a mutual decision between the client and us. So if we thought, you know what, you are not ready at this time, we would talk to the client about that, and, you know, have them take an active role in that conversation. Say, look, you're not ready, you know, you don't have to, you know, we would tell them there are other service providers you can choose, right? They always have the choice. But it's our opinion that you're not ready yet. This is what I feel you need to do before you are ready. You have the option to choose another service provider. But if you decide to take these steps and come back to us, we'd be happy to work with you at that point. Yeah. But if we felt, there are very few times we felt that someone was not ready with a little bit of support and finding the right job, that they weren't ready for employment. It was more a question of maybe that individual can only work, you know, 4 hours a week right now as a first step. And, you know, but that's the first step towards building them up, but it's still competitive employment. You know, but there were some situations where it was obvious they needed to rethink things or go back or take some other steps. And again, that's where we bring something in like the volunteer organization. Maybe, okay, why don't you volunteer for 3 months, get some work experience, get used to getting out of the house and doing the routine, and get some references and build your confidence level up, and then come back to us. You know, and we will work with you at that point if you do that, if you take those steps. So they know you're not just ditching them, excuse the expression, but you know, and we were very conscious that if we say no, there's very little else out there for them, and that was difficult from a human being point of view. It's very hard to say no when you're aware that there's not much else out there for them. So where there's an opportunity, we would help them. Where it's not possible at this point, we would be clear about the steps we felt they need to take before they can be ready to come back.
Just one. Oh.
Yes, Sylvia, go ahead.
Just last question. Did you ever have a client that was referred to you, but they didn't want to be there? They just because their OW caseworker referred them or someone referred them, like they had to be there doing this program. And how do you deal with that? Um, you know,
Yeah.
that you're trying to convince them that this is a good program, but they're like, no, I don't want to do anything. I'm just here because I have to be here.
Good question, Sylvia.
That's it. I won't ask anything else.
No, just leave me with that question, right? Yeah. That happened. It happened a lot. And that is one of the most difficult situations that you can face. And that could be maybe not OW, maybe it's a family member who's telling them, you have to do this, and they don't want to do it. And that is really difficult. So in those situations, it's nice to know, actually, in a way, because if the client is telling you that, then at least, okay, now you know what the problem is and what you need to focus on, which is a good thing. And then whether it's OW or whether it's a family member or someone else that is behind this, ask the client if it's okay if you talk to that individual or talk to that organization, to sign over a confidentiality agreement that you can communicate with this other organization or person and have an open discussion about that. If it's OW, say, I'm meeting with this client and they're telling me they don't want to work. What can we do? Like, how can we work together? Is this the right time? And, what's your opinion on that?
It seems, sorry. It seems more you're a counselor, like a psychologist or something, before you even become an employment consultant. Getting them the job is not the least of the worries. I think it's getting them motivated, getting them to come in, get them to follow up, that's a psychology. Like that's, that would be something that you would be doing.
And that's true. You know what? So that's exactly it. And the funny thing is, over 20 years and I don't know how many situations, I would say disability and accommodation was a barrier maybe 10% of the time. Most of the stuff I was dealing with in terms of being a barrier to employment was outside of disability. It's in terms of attitude, motivation, external pressures to work, you name it. The psychologist stuff, if you want to call it that, or the counseling stuff.
Yes.
That was the barrier in most cases, which is odd, but that's just through experience. That's just the way it was.
Ryan, and continuing with Sylvia's points, one thing you mentioned that, you work out, and I know there's this mathematics, I can work 10 hours, 12 hours a week, and still my benefits are still on, and I'm basically they're making more or in the same equation. What happens with so far with EO, and I think, and Wanda and David could, they know maybe have more updated information. But with EO, we know that we for part-time jobs, they're supposed to be working 20 hours or more in order for us to close as employed. Okay. So like for us, 10, 12 hours a week would still be, no, we still have to, I don't know what's the new WCG model would like. Would they allow us, especially dealing with persons with disabilities or onto your works, would they allow us to close files working less than 20 hours, which so far with EO, I know it's 20 hours or more. So that will be our challenge. If they change it, that will be good. I hope there will be a bit understanding. But if not, then it will remain our challenge to at least they're working 20 hours or more. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. For many individuals that we're working, we can be working with some pretty significant barriers to employment, and for some individuals, 3 hours a week is as much as they can do, but that 3 hours a week has made a huge difference in their life. And it's difficult to hear that when there's a minimum, it's not taking into account really every individual, and we all have different needs, and there are different stages in our life, and that 3 hours a week can turn into 20. But to go for that person to go from 0 to 20, from no job to 20 hours a week, might be insurmountable. And then what happens? What are they able to do? So I'm glad you're concerned about that, because I think a lot of clients might lose the service if it is set at a high minimum.
Do you find employers are receptive to job carving? Like, could you go in there and say, look, I've got 3 individuals who could do this job, carve it up into 3 different parts. Is that a doable thing? And I'm not sure how you approach employers about that.
Absolutely, it is a doable thing, and it can actually really work well, but it ties into the former question. It's more difficult to do if you've got, a minimum of 20 hours a week. That's when job carving becomes difficult. Because really it's a full-time job at 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week. But if you have employers that have certain periods of time throughout the day where they could use a little bit of extra support, for example, to go back to a restaurant, at lunch and at dinner, if we had someone else here, we don't have a job available specifically for this, but if someone could come in and do this role for that time period or those time periods, yes, that would be a huge help. We could definitely benefit from them. And if you've got the client that only wants to work or is able to work those hours, it's a great combination. It's a great fit. So job carving works best for more part-time work, I find.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can identify a need and show the employer this is how it's going to benefit your business to have this individual there, or let's just give it a try. Let's see what happens. Let's try.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, I had a question regarding roles, and I think you explained a little bit, but in terms of your organization, like how many do you have in your role as a job developer, and what other roles do you have in addition to administration, including management? Like how many professionals do you have in your organization, and what those roles would be in terms of title?
Right. So it's not the normal model, but we have 2 full-time job developers. We have a full-time administrative person. We have a full-time retention specialist. We have someone full-time as well that helps with intakes and other things as well, just kind of back and forth between roles. We have a few individuals as well that are job coaches that are available kind of on an as needed basis. And we have someone else that part-time that generates leads and looks for opportunities and stuff like that. So that's what we have.
And management, is it like 2 or 3, 1 or 1?
You know what, we're all management team is hands-on. We're doing all the stuff. We're doing the job development. Yeah, it's not a big bureaucratic.
So you're a manager there, Ryan? Is that what you're saying? You're one of the managers?
He's the one that hands-on for everything.
We all do it. We've all got our hands in the pot. And the nice thing about it is we all communicate with each other. So all the time. There aren't a lot of meetings that go on. There's, we're planning. It's just like, let's just get the job done. On that note, though, at least once a month, we do all get together and go through every client. So we bring our whole team in to get different perspectives on what's happening. And but on a day-to-day basis, just very informal but casual discussions about, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? And can you help me with that? And it's not a formal structure, but it works really well for us.
Karen, I just wanted to ask, just following with that, what skills or qualifications would a staff member, whether it's a job developer or I would call it the intake worker or the employment consultant, to deal with mental health? The initial intake is dealing with what other issues they have, so probing. but what skills would you have to, I know I wouldn't be able to have those skills of dealing with mental health or anything.
And I'd like to, add to that, being, working with Costi as long as I have, and being a intake worker slash facilitator at the RNI, and I know Roxanne can back me up with this, clients don't always indulge all the information. Even if we do probe, there's only a certain amount of information that they provide, no matter how much probing we do. Okay, and I see what is laughing. And the thing is that they say one thing when they speak to us, but then when they go to the EC, they divulge all this information, and it kind of makes us look bad. And it doesn't mean that we're not probing; it means that we are, but they're just not divulging that information, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure you probably have experienced that as well.
Yes. Yeah, it was an ongoing thing. Absolutely. Okay. 100%. Yeah. And that's where your relationship with the employer is really important, and to actually, but also beyond that, to own it and just say, I apologize. I was unaware of this. If there's something that you weren't aware of and something came up at work with the employer, and just be open about it, not to, pretend that you're on top of everything. I mean, sometimes things happen, and just to be open and honest with them, and that builds trust with the employer. You can say, I'll do everything I can, but just let them know too, and just say, just like anyone we hire, you never know how it's going to work out. Exactly. And most employers can relate to that. Even outside of our programs, they've hired individuals that haven't worked out for whatever reason, and there were surprises. So they'll understand as long as you own it. We are beholden on the client to tell us. I mean, we don't get anything. We don't get any information. So whatever they choose to share is whatever they choose to share. And sometimes you find out through trial and error, which is tough, but sometimes stuff come out later on, and it's, like I said, proof, trial and error. It's like, okay, we've just identified another barrier, and kind of recalibrate, meet with them again and discuss that. And then sometimes they'll open up at that point. Yeah, so we have to work with what we have, but absolutely, that's a good point. That's a big issue.
Not sure if you answered my question about qualifications. Sorry.
So just in terms of the referral source, I think you explained at the beginning. So you're basically getting referrals from ODSP only, and clients that actually have already the income support part from ODSP. So if they're not registered yet with that, they're not going to be clients. They have to be ODSP recipients in your case. You don't get funding from other sources.
Correct. We don't get funding from other sources. However, they don't have to be on income supports to work with us. So they just have to have a disability. We do work with clients that are only on the employment support. So they just came to us, they have a disability, they have a doctor's form verifying that disability, and we only help them with the employment supports, and they're not eligible for the ODSP income supports. So that is possible, but we only work with the ODSP program. So they need to qualify for employment supports at the very least for us to work with them. And some people, their status changes. Sometimes people are only employment supports clients, and then they get approved for income supports halfway through. And the only thing that really changes for us in that situation would be the length of time that we support them. Because if you're not on income supports and you're approved only for ODSP employment supports, then we only work with you for 15 months instead of the 33. And you're not eligible for startup benefit, but you are if you're on income support. So there's small changes, but we still provide them with the same service. Sorry, someone was talking about the qualifications. What was that? Sorry, the previous question. What was
dealing
that?
With mental health.
Yeah.
Remember, I was asking is what qualifications or skills does an employment or staff need in order to do the dealing with mental health?
I think it's more of the soft skills. It's more of the good listening skills. It's more of the passion and drive to help people.
Okay.
It's because we don't want to, even though we talked earlier about this being a lot of counseling, we're not counselors, you know, we're not professional counselors, we're not professional psychologists. So
But we need that skill though.
we need the skill, but not necessarily the certification.
Qualification.
But we need the skill and try to tie, the way to look at it perhaps is to try to tie everything into the job. You know, like how does this impact your ability to do this job? Or how does this impact your ability to work? Because at least that focuses the counseling role down a bit, and you can then get the supports of more qualified individuals with other organizations to support the other stuff outside of work, if that makes sense. But it can be very complex, but again, we're only dealing with what they tell us to. So, you know, it's more of try to be as open as you can with us, and okay, this is the situation, this is what we think, does that work for you? Okay, yes, we have a plan, and then do your best and see what happens. And then when something comes up, it's maybe revisit everything again with the new knowledge that you have now, and update your plan and just kind of go for it.
And this is one of the reasons why WCG is so reticent about making sure that we develop these community partnerships.
Right.
Because you're right. We're not psychologists. We're not paid psychologists, but we have to have some of those skills and tendencies. Just like in the same situation, I'll thank Ryan again. I had a situation with a client that many of our Mississauga people know, Aldo, who had some issues and concerns, and I was not able to help him because I'm not qualified. I don't have the training and the expertise that Ryan did. Ryan came down from Brampton and spent a good 90 minutes with him, helping him through some of the questions. And I got a little bit of an understanding of what you have to go through to be able to help these people. And again, you're not a psychologist, you're not expected to be, but certainly just, I think, active listening and being able to come up with some constructive suggestions afterwards and seeing how they fly with this person is very helpful.
I think just showing your client that you're genuinely there to help them goes a really long way. A lot of people throughout their life have faced, you know, a lot of challenges, particularly in this group, or maybe people that haven't helped them, or difficulty dealing with authority figures. If you just show that you're just genuinely here to help them, I think that can go a long way. And perhaps with the WCG model or the new model, I'm not that familiar with it, but you'll probably have more information when the client comes to you. They'll have gone through an assessment process, and you know, maybe you will have more information when you meet with them than we have now through ODSP, where it's all, you know, the client can just volunteer to tell you whatever they want. So that might help with that aspect.
Yeah. And just to that point, there is a system, a common assessment tool called CAT, C-A-T, that's online. I've administered it once to a client just as a trial basis to see how it goes. It took about 25, 30 minutes to administer. And you walk them through the questions on Zoom, which is easy because they can see the questions and you ask them the answer. They give you the answer. They can see that you recorded it. You move on. Again, depends on the person's level of comprehension and their level of English as to how well they can get through those questions. But those are the assessments that actually qualify people as an A, a B, or a C. And they're the ones that will help us stream how many clients we have in each one of those categories, A, B, or C. So every client's going to be going through that as an assisted client.
Great. You're asking a lot of great questions.
Very good questions. I compliment the team because let's just see, there's other questions here. Slava, we've addressed that. How it would be useful to have a mental health addiction counselor on staff. Yes, the question is budget, and the answer really is dealing with our partners to hopefully tie into them to have them. Much like we have settlement workers come in from Peel Multicultural Council. They come in once a month and sit and talk to our clients who have settlement issues, because that's what their specialty is. We've had situations, or we've had sessions where people from the Canadian Mental Health Association will talk about depression and put on a seminar for our clients at no cost, just to make them aware of what services are available to them. And if they want to have a separate conversation, then of course they can do that individually.
Can I just ask one question? Another one? Okay, keep going.
You keep saying one question, so I mean, it's
That's
one
it.
more, and I'm joking. Go ahead. Go ahead.
How do you deal with the workload? Like, say, if someone has already a caseload, like you're 35,
Yeah.
and then we still have more people coming, and it's like, how do you put them on a wait list, or like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, a really effective tool is that at the beginning, that roles and responsibilities sheet that I discussed, so that the clients can take an active role in your job search, because it really shouldn't be on you to shoulder the whole burden of finding a job. It should be a 50-50 relationship. And if that is set out from the beginning, that can be helpful. That can lessen the burden a little bit. If it does get too much and we find as a team, you know what, this is just too much, we're no longer providing the same level or quality of service to everybody, then you know, there have been instances where we placed our intakes on hold, you know, and just because we don't want the quality of service to go down, and that's really important to us. We'll do the best we can to manage it. Maybe look at our caseload and say, is everybody we're working with really ready right now? Has everyone been participating in their job search? If not, let's find out why. And, you know, maybe they're not ready right now, or maybe we need to make some moves and just make sure that we're only working with the individuals who are ready at this time and motivated and participating.
And then close, right? You would close them in the system, or?
In some cases, yeah. In some cases, we would close them in the system, yeah. But that would always be a discussion we would have with the client, unless we can't get a hold of them. And then it's a big point, you know, we document, we tried on this, you know, these occasions to contact, no response. We tried this, we tried that. And then it's like, okay, so, you know, closed due to lack of contact, no contact. I mean, because what more can we do at that point? Or we might find out that someone is just not ready right now and they just haven't shared that with us. And it's a nice way to clean things up.
So with this 35B clients that I have to do, like, you have to keep them for 13 months, you said, or how long would you have to keep them for, right?
Yeah, so the way it works with ODSP, so if they're only employment supports clients, we work with them for 15 months, but that only starts when they've been hired. So the clock starts ticking at their first day of employment for their first job. For income supports clients, it's 33 months, and that starts first day of their first job.
And then you do a monthly follow-up for 13 months.
Correct. Yes, we do. Yes.
So are they part of the 35 intake, or is it that okay, say 10 people found employment, okay, so 10 people take away from my workload now, even though now you have 45 people, but you're just doing a follow-up on 10.
Yeah, and again, that number is just, it fluctuates, but really the number I'm talking about with 35 is at any given time as a job developer, I'm working with 35 clients. So those are individuals who are not working.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have our retention specialist who is looking after everyone who's working. But for that individual, I mean, it's not as time consuming because most of the time you're just checking it. You know, how's the job going? How, you know, and the employer. So the retention specialist can work with a much greater caseload because of the time commitment involved with each client. So for the 35 clients as a job developer, those are people who are, we're actively looking for work, which can, obviously that takes up a lot of time, as you know, sometimes. So yeah, but again, as I said, usually about 10 that are really actively searching and that we're really focused on at any given time.
Ryan, sorry, the job coaching or any issues during the employment in terms of job maintenance, would that be dealt by you, the job developer, or the job retention specialist? What's in your organization?
Yeah, no, you're welcome. No, we have job coaches they just do job coaching and they would look after that. But the retention specialist is the individual who decides on that need. So our retention specialist will assign the job coaches the hours and duties as they see fit. So that's the responsibility of the retention specialist. But we have job coaches that will go in and do that, and all they do is job coaching.
That was my question, Ryan.
Yeah.
So the job coach, you said a few individuals as job coaches when I asked the question, but the retention specialist is it's a totally separate person doing
Correct.
that, and they're taking care of all the job retention for all the clients.
That's right. Yeah. And really, they're the best person to decide on the job coaching. It's nice for them to have that responsibility in a way, because it also shows the employer that we can respond in a timely manner. So if our retention specialist is checking with the employer and the employer says, you know what, they've really fallen behind in this area, they could use some extra training or could have some extra support, he or she can say right on the spot, you know what, no problem, I'll bring in a job coach for a couple of hours next week. And then, it's a great system. It's very efficient, and they can make it happen and they can respond quickly to the employer. I find that in general with employers, they really like it if you do most of the work for them. It's if they know they can count on you to look after all of the details, I mean, they're very happy to work with you. If they just know, okay, I know that, Karen or Wanda or Grace or whomever is going to handle it, it makes it, they'll want to work with you more and more.
You know what, when you talk about employers and having good relationships with them, and they want you to do the work as much as possible, but are they willing to give back in terms of a success story? Do you depend on those success stories to find other employers who say, well, why would I hire disabled people? There's so many people that don't have issues. Why can't I hire them instead? And then you could cite these employers as examples.
Exactly. That's how it all starts. It starts with one employer in a certain industry, and then they're very happy with you. And even if and that includes clients that didn't work out for the reasons that we discussed earlier. Maybe something has come up and they're not ready, or a surprise or something. But yeah, if you have that relationship and you're open and you own it, and they'll trust you to, okay, let's try someone else. Or you can say, I know that didn't work out. Would you be open? We have this other person that, now that I know more about your business, now that I know more about what you're looking for or whatever, we have this individual. Would you be open to giving he or she a try? They're much more likely to do that. And then when you go to a new employer, it's like networking on a personal note, but it's in a professional note where they're aware of, you might have someone that's a franchisee owner of 5 places, 5 Canadian Tires, and you go to a new one with a different franchise owner, but they're very aware of the one that owns the 5 that they don't own. And it gives you authority. It gives you some legitimacy when you're approaching a new employer, that you have that track record and you can talk about, hey, Dave over at, at that Canadian Tire, they've hired 6 individuals from us, and that gives you some authority and legitimacy.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to clarify, because we're coming up almost 3 o'clock, and I want to respect the fact that you actually have a job. You don't work for us, and I wish you did. But you have taken so much time can I suggest two things? One, if other people have questions that we weren't able to answer, can I bring them back to you and then I can be your filter and just shuttle back and forth answers from Ryan? Is that okay?
I have better idea. Can
What's
I
that?
speak? Okay, can he come back when WCG gives us the guidelines how to work with the people?
Yeah,
Do another meeting?
Oh,
that would be
oh,
good.
Would be good, yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be much better than anything else. That's what I
by
think.
popular demand, Ryan, is that a possibility if I'm able to give back to your organization in some way, shape, or form?
I'd be happy to help in any way I can. Yeah, like please filter everything through David. And yeah, thank you for asking.
We're adding more work to you.
Yeah, exactly. That's okay. No, I love it. I'm really, I'm actually very grateful for what you do, what we all do collectively. I know we're struggling. We don't have a lot of resources. We're dealing with situations that might look impossible. It might be almost impossible, but you know what? We're really making a difference. I don't mean to sound cheesy, but you know, if there's any way I can help, I mean, I think it's a great cause, and I'm here.
That's great. One thing I'd like to do is my colleague she's been hot on the typing but quiet on the voice, but I want to turn it over to Wanda, my colleague. She's our manager for our Brampton office, and let her just have some closing remarks.
Hi, Ryan. Nice to meet you. It's been an incredible afternoon of information. Really, really valuable. I think the team asked some fantastic questions as well. I think they kept you engaged there, and it's obvious too with their request that you come back and do a repeat for us. But it has been really, really awesome. I think that the sector is well served having people like yourself. I just sent a quote from one of our former managers at Costi, who used to say all the time, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And from you, everything that you've said and the way that you've shared so generously of your experience with the team here and talking about how you work with clients, it's obvious that you're one of those people who really do care. And I just want to really thank you on behalf of the team.
Absolutely. And not to upstage Wanda, but Slava, who has not, she's been having technical difficulties. We have only seen Slava's name. We can't hear her or see her, but she did say, thank you, Ryan, for the information and advice. Pass it on.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It really has been a pleasure. And I look forward to our next meeting.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ryan.
Bye
All the
for now.
best. Be safe.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Go Leafs, go.
Thanks, Ryan. It was wonderful.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you.